This is the one thing that us as parents have to understand. Our children's brains are not fully developed until they're in their mid-20s. And so they are shaping, their brains are literally being shaped as they go through life, and they are not fully developed. So we are literally molding their brains or helping them mold their brains. So by allowing them to be on social media or these other technology platforms, that is shaping their brains, not necessarily the morals and principles and values that we should be teaching our kids. So we have a moral duty to protect our kids' brains because they are being developed by other people. We have to protect that.
Welcome to the Outlier Mindset Podcast, your guide for living a life by design. Here, we explore the journey of becoming an outlier, finding your purpose, mastering your mindset, optimizing your health, achieving financial freedom, and building a life centered around your passions. So tune in, transform, and thrive. Welcome to the Outlier Mindset. Let the journey begin. Welcome to the Outlier Mindset Podcast. I am your host, Rodman Schley, and today my guest is Purdeep Sangha. Purdeep is widely recognized as a strategist for businessmen, offering a unique approach to helping them win in both their personal and in their professional lives. Known for his award-winning book, The Complete Man, and the TV show, Mind Your Own Business, Purdeep combines cutting-edge neuroscience with proven strategies to guide entrepreneurs toward achieving peak performance. Purdeep, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Rodman. I appreciate you having me.
I'm excited. There's so much content that you provide and so much knowledge that you can provide our listeners, specifically when it comes to business. I've done a lot of research on who you are and what you provide, and I know that you align very deeply with the mission of the people that are listening to this show. So thanks for coming on. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your book, The Complete Man. I'm curious. What is the philosophies in that book, and what are you teaching there?
Yeah, wow, that's a loaded question. So the philosophies are basically the learnings that I've taken throughout my life, from the mentors that have taught me, from the experiences that I've had, plus the scientific research and the practical research that we've done to really help guys live a more fulfilling life. So it's essentially, there's three main pillars that we have here. It's predominantly performance, but there's also a sense of achievement. So the way I put it is there's no point performing if you're not actually going to achieve something. So there's the achievement piece, but then it takes it one step further, which is what a lot of guys miss out on is the fulfillment aspect. And so how do they be fulfilled regardless of how well they're performing or not performing, or what they're achieving or not achieving? And I think that's the most fundamental aspect of life. And the reason why is because I've seen my dad, who was a business owner, was an entrepreneur, never struggled with money after, he built a successful business, but struggled with his own fulfillment, and he struggled with alcoholism. So I saw him struggle with that his entire life, as much as I could remember, my entire life, you can say, and eventually caught up with him. So for the philosophy around The Complete Man is a continuous evolution of growing and evolving. And the irony behind it is that you're never really complete. So that's the whole concept behind it. And it really stems from a core learning that I had throughout my life, which I was, had the benefit of learning from my grandfather, who was a very, I'm going to say, influential part of my life. He was a very spiritual man, but also was in the military for 30 plus years in India. And he taught me the value of principles. He taught me the value of your word is your bond, but he also had a very spiritual background. And it was something very interesting. Our religious background, I'm not very religious, but I consider religion and philosophy very tightly tied together. And so the philosophy behind our religion, which is Sikhism, is to be a disciple. The word Sikh or Sikhi means to continue to learn or be a disciple of. So that's a core aspect of the book. The main philosophy behind the book is to continue to learn, because we're in a constant state of evolution of trying to be the complete person, because most of us feel like we are missing something, and the vast majority of us feel like we're missing something big in our life.
Well, and it's a lifelong journey. And when you're talking about how to grow and how to evolve and how to be great, there's men, and as men, we have this thing called ego all over us. It's in front of us. It gets in our way. It makes it so we don't maybe make those next steps that we need to make. But a lot of times, when people think they know it all, or they think that they're exactly as far as they're going to get in life, and you stop growing, everything kind of breaks down. I believe that you physically break down, you mentally break down, but it's that ego, I feel like, gets in the way a lot as men, because we feel like we don't need the help, or we don't need to grow, or we already know everything. What about those people? What would you tell those folks who are sitting there saying, well, I've got all the growth I need? What would you tell them in terms of what they should be doing to make the right steps to continue to grow, to be great?
Yeah, I think for me, that's an easy one because working with men is not the easiest thing. It can be quite difficult because we are very stubborn, right? That ego does get in the way. But I've learned from years and decades of experience, because I've been coaching people for 30 plus years, is that you have to meet people where they are, particularly men. And so I cannot force a man to think differently unless he's at the point where he needs to. So there has to be a level of acceptance. So for men that are in that spot, I think the important thing is to look inside and say, are you truly deeply fulfilled with your life? Are you truly deeply fulfilled with who you are? If you are, great. If you aren't, stop kidding yourself. And that's the most important thing, because as soon as honesty from within is the most important aspect. And if we're not honest with ourselves, then we're not going to live a very honest life. And we're going to continue living with this sense of fake fulfillment or satisfaction or status, which eventually catches up with most men. It does, because we work with men in their 60s and 70s, and many of them have regrets because they haven't been honest with themselves early on. So I think that the one thing that I would say is be honest with yourself. Ask yourself those deep questions and give yourself some deep answers, because it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to not feel like you're successful. It's okay to feel like you're not enough. But the most important thing is to realize that you're actually feeling that way rather than masking it.
It seems to me too, like men have a much harder time asking for that help, or asking for that outside information to come in that they can process and use for them. I mean, we're grown, as we grow up in life, we're taught to be tough, have this exterior, keep those emotions down. You don't need to be bubbling those out. And I feel like a lot of people are held back, or they don't reach their full potential because they can't clean out all the stuff that they got inside of them, because they're not willing to let it out, or they're not willing to be vulnerable enough to learn from those things and get better from them.
Yeah. I think just on that note, just from what I've seen through experiences, my dad taught me a lot. My dad was a big guy, like physically a big guy. He was also in the police force in India for 7 years or so. Very strong, physically strong. And he is probably one of the most emotional men I've ever known. Like, he's no longer around, but he was the most masculine man and the most emotionally open man. And my wife says it even now. She's like, I miss your dad. He was just so open and emotional, and from that perspective. So you can be a very masculine man and be emotional. There's nothing wrong with that. And my dad was a proof of concept of that. He was basically, no one questioned his masculinity. When he was in the room, you could feel his presence without even seeing him, because he had that much, you could say, aura around him and presence around him. But to be able to be open is not a weakness. It's actually a strength. And I think we as men have this message today that men are receiving. A lot of it's false, because they say you need to be more emotional. It's not necessarily about being more emotional. It's being more in tune with your emotions and sharing those emotions. And I think if men understand what that means, because it allows them to actually be more successful, because emotions have a big part to do with performance, and we have the science behind that, and connecting with other people and having more influence. So can you be a stronger leader in business? Can you be a better father? Can you be a better husband by being able to get down and be in touch with your emotions and connect with people on an emotional level? Yeah, the answer is absolutely. So there's a lot of positive benefits behind emotions. And when guys understand that from a scientific perspective, they're like, okay, I get it.
Well, what are some of the things that are holding men back from being the complete man?
Oh, wow. So one of the things that you talked about is the first part is doing it alone. I call it the Lone Ranger approach, because there is no success by yourself. It just doesn't happen. To be successful, you need other people. It's a core principle, especially if you want to be successful faster. But the other part is, what is success? And what does success mean to you? And when I say you, each one of us as an individual, we have the right to choose what success means to us. So success for me means that, yes, I'm financially free, but also that I have a happy family, family that is with two healthy children. I have an 8-year-old and 10-year-old that are mentally and emotionally healthy and contribute to the world in a positive way rather than in a taking away from the world. And so that is what success means to me more than anything, and having an impact on the world. So I'm not about, how much money do I have in my bank account, or how big my business is or how my status is. The most important thing is we live on our own path and have a different, I'm going to say, definition of success. So so what I'm trying to simplify here is that we mistakenly see success a certain way because of other influences, by seeing other men and the way they live, and the social status, and we say that's the way we should live too. That's not necessarily the case. So that's another element. The other mistake I would say is not focusing on fulfillment and emotions during or along the path or along the journey, because that leads. So the whole point is we're all, at the end of the day, we're at the same finish line. We're all going to be at the same finish line. At some point in time, we're going to say goodbye. But it's how we run that race that actually is more important than anything. So, and it comes down to this premise of legacy. And I talk about this in my book. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. Legacy is how you live. That is more important. Again, this false sense of I need to leave this legacy of X amount of money or my impact in terms of the business or the business brand or whatever that is. No, it's how you live. That's going to have the biggest impact on people. So there's a number of these things I'm going to say that are a challenge. The other one is the quality. If I say what are many men struggling with today, is the quality of relationship that they have with their significant other, and the quality of relationships that they have with their children. And so I think there is a challenge. There's a significant challenge there, that men are being skewed more towards financial success, and have been for a long time, financial success and business success, than they have been when it comes to relationship success and parenting success. That's starting to shift now a lot more. But the way to counter that, and I always get guys to do this, is what is your family goal? What's your relationship goal? What's your family goal? What's your parenting goal? And so when you ask that question, is we have goals for our business, we have goals for our finances, but rarely do we have goals for our intimate relationship or our family unit, or as a father, if you're a man.
We talk a lot about building a life by design too. And so many people are letting life dictate to them how they should be living instead of dictating how they want their life to be lived. And I think a lot of that's that outside pressure. You were talking about these pressures that we have in life in terms of how we should live, how we should get up, how we should put ourselves into the world. And instead of really taking that step back and going, well, what do I want? What do I want to put into the world? And I think you're talking about the business success and the time and the energy that we funnel into that. And as men, we feel that responsibility. It feels like it's been like years and years and years of evolving and these pressures in life to do things a certain way. But how do you start breaking out of that trend? How do you go, you know what? I'm going to start living life on my terms, and it doesn't have to look like this. Success doesn't have to look like this. Success could be, number one, the fact that I'm getting up in my family. I've got this incredibly close family unit. But how do people start breaking out of those patterns that I almost feel like we've been trained over and over again for years and years?
Okay, so I'll talk about what's behind that, and then I'll get into the practical elements, because the first thing is we as human beings, there's this concept. So this is through my learnings and through my teachings, and you can say there's a big aspect of spiritual elements in there too, is we are at the core, we have the soul. And that's truly who we are. And outside of that soul, we have an ego. And that ego is there to protect us. But there's another layer outside of that, which is the identity. And the identity that we hold and how we live by throughout our life. And that is who we believe we are. And that identity is shaped primarily by society. And there's a number of factors of identity. It's your physical attributes, for example. It's your personality traits. But also the roles that you play in society. So the social roles. So the role as a business owner, for example, the role as a husband, the role as a father, all of those roles basically create your identity. If you take a look at an onion, for example, each one of those roles creates a layer over that core, the core part of the onion. And so what we get meant to do is it's almost like a reset. And it's tough for many men to do this because, again, we've been programmed for decades to be this way. But one of the things that I do, and we get the people that we work with to do, is go away for a number of days. It could be 2 days. It could be one night minimum. I go away for 4 days, not with my family, not with my wife, just myself. And I go away every single year, and I go back, and it takes me about a day or two to really pull back and say, who am I? And who do I want to be? And the first question then is, that's the first question. The second is, remove all of those roles, right? If I wasn't a father, if I wasn't a husband, if I wasn't a business leader, what kind of life would I want to live? And then you have to add those layers back, but you have to remove those layers first, because the first thing that we go to and we default to is, okay, what's my responsibility and accountability as a husband? What's my responsibility and accountability as a father? And those things weigh us down. And by a sheer obligation, we are not able to live the life that we truly want to live by. Many of us do, because, when we layer it back on, when we say, yeah, that's the kind of life I do want. But there might be certain aspects, for example, yeah, I want to work, but maybe I don't want to work 7 days a week. Maybe I want to work 5 days a week. Yeah, I want to have a good lifestyle, but do I need to have all these extra expenses? Right? So these are all the different things that we need to take a look at and go back at. And it's similar to a financial plan. And because this is one of the core aspects of one of our businesses, if you take a look at the lifestyle that a person wants to live, like truly wants to live, and you take a look at the amount of money it takes to enable them to live that lifestyle, for the vast majority of people, it's a lot less than what they think. They feel like they need to make millions of dollars when it might be, maybe it's $500,000 a year to have that kind of lifestyle. And when people recalibrate that and reset themselves, they realize that perhaps they're just running around like crazy and not actually enjoying and fulfilling their life to the degree that they want, because they just haven't fully understood the end game.
So when you're doing this work, you're doing this once a year and getting away, removing the layers, going deep and doing that work. I would assume for most men, it just doesn't work that way. We get so inundated with life that we lose our vision. We lose kind of track of who we are because we're not doing that work, because we're not doing those deep dives to really figure that thing out for ourselves. And then I think everybody suffers because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. They do. And I think one of the other things you asked, like, how does a person do this? One is going through this exercise. The second is having a peer group or a mentor group that is aligned from that perspective. So the easiest way to maintain and sustain behavior is to have a social group that has very similar behavior. So if a man, and most men do isolate themselves and don't have that peer group that is aligned with the direction that they want to go, and so they are isolated. So for them to continue the behavior, to sustain the behavior, it's a lot tougher. So that's why I always recommend being by like-minded people, men or women, whoever's in your group, that can enable you, and actually not only that, but also hold you accountable. So if there's a group of 5 guys that are saying, hey, we're all going to go away this year, we're all going to go to separate places, or maybe we do it together, but we're going to do this once a year. We're going to reset ourselves and plan out our next year. And here's a date, or here are the dates, and hold each other accountable. It's a lot easier to do that.
Now, your tribe is everything. And, I could see that with men, how men might not embrace the tribe as much as say women do. But why do you think men push against that so much?
From a society perspective and a social behavior perspective, one of the things that we've seen is people are becoming a lot more isolated. We're seeing that now today, in the first time in history, in modern world, for example, North America, Canada, and the US, people are becoming less happier. And so that's one thing. And the core part of that is because we're isolated. Even though we have technology, we are socially isolated. So that is one aspect. One of the things that has died down is, for example, family dinners, right? And connecting with other people. I know where I live, which is, you could say, probably the capital area of Canada, just outside of Toronto. People are so busy, they don't get to, friends don't get to see each other for months on end. And so that has limited our interactions and our social structures. But there's also what used to happen back in the day is we used to have pride, and we used to, I'm going to say, how do I put this? The word that is skipping my mind here, value our elders. and value mentorship. And we don't have that same level of mentorship, and we don't have that same level of value for our elders, grandparents, for example, or aunts and uncles that we used to a number of decades ago. So that wisdom is not being shared now to that same degree of or level. And that's having a huge impact on men. Because if we don't have the right mentors, then we're kind of doing things on our own. I was lucky enough that I had my grandfather as a mentor, my dad in certain ways. I had uncles that I looked up to that were great mentors. We're not talking about famous people or influencers on social media these days. We're just talking about everyday people in our lives that have some wisdom to share with us. We are significantly, severely lacking in that area, and I think we need to bring that back.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that stems from COVID. I mean, I know that, people when we got isolated, when we got put into quarantine and we couldn't get into our social circles, we spent all that time where we couldn't go out and have those meaningful relationships that we had for so long. And then all of a sudden people got used to just working from home, being at home, not getting together, not doing these things. I'm guilty of that. I know that for me, I went from an office building where I would go in and, run my companies every day to now I do everything from my house. So literally my commute is from my bedroom into my studio and into my workspace. And I don't get that same social interaction that I used to. And I really, really miss it. But what do you think it's going to take for people to start waking back up to that and saying, I want those social aspects back. I want my tribe back?
That's a tough question for me to answer. And our organization, we partnered with 17 universities and research institutions in Canada and the US over a number of years. And we did a lot of the studies. One thing that we didn't study was, you could say, social isolation or the structure of family units and so forth. That was other organizations. But the one thing that I see, and I'm just going to talk from there's no empirical evidence here, but just my observation here, is that I don't know if we're going to. And the reason why I say this is people like yourself, your generation, our generation, for example, is different than the newer generation. They're growing up in technology. They're growing up with social isolation. They're growing up with going to universities and colleges and attending classes virtually. It's a different ballgame. So there is this change that's happening. And unless we do a better job as parenting our kids and showing that, I think there is a significant risk of it being lost, because we also have AI that's coming into the picture, and we've just started with that. And we also have virtual reality. And those two things, I feel, and I'm going to say this, I'm an optimist, but I have friends in this realm, but I think those are two things that are very detrimental to society. Because my son, for example, he plays Roblox, which is an online game, and he is addicted to it. I have to, he's allowed 1 hour. If I gave him the entire day, he would play it. That's not even AI. That's not virtual reality. If that was, it'd be a completely different ballgame. So to answer your question, I think the way that we can do that is by us teaching our kids better. That's what it's going to take for us to be able to do that. And I think we have to make a very concerted effort to do that. I'll give you one other example here that's happened in Canada, Rodman, is in our province, a number of institutions, academic institutions and organizations have come together to sue. And I don't want to talk about, let's just say, the moral aspect of this, to sue social media companies. And I don't want to name them, but they're saying, you guys have created addictive platforms that are now hurting the children, and they are no longer able to learn as effectively as a result of that. And you are doing it knowingly. And so we are starting to see a backlash of this. And I think that if we continue for people having these mindful conversations to say, hey, look, our kids spending time on social media, adults spending time on social media is not healthy for us, I think it's going to come back around. It may take 10 years, but we need to have more mindful conversations around this.
Now, I feel like we're living this 2 to 5 second world these days, where you've got, your TikTok or your reels, where, you've got this attention span that's 2 to 5 seconds, and you've got our children, you get the adults doing the same thing, scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and the attention span has gone down. But I'd also say that if you are a parent and you can teach your kids those social skills now, your kid's going to be at a great advantage compared to those kids who are not getting those social skills.
Yeah, it's going to be a competitive advantage. I always tell people, because we do high performance training for business professionals, entrepreneurs, and executive teams, and it's based on neuroscience and performance psychology. One of the things that we always like, I do believe one of the strongest skills, or the most important skills when it comes to competitive advantage going forward, is going to be the ability to maintain your focus and attention on the things that you need to. I do believe that. I'm seeing, again, people struggling with their attentions or attention span, where that goes. I think it's going to be a huge competitive advantage. So if we can teach our children that, they're definitely going to be better off. And forget about the workplace. They're going to have better relationships, because if you can't pay attention to your spouse, if you can't pay attention to your kids because you have a limited capacity, well, good luck having a fulfilling relationship. It's not going to happen.
You know, sometimes we can aimlessly drift through our life, not really sure how to break the patterns and live the life that you've always dreamed of. I get it. I have been there, so caught up in chasing opportunities until I found myself in a life that felt foreign to me. It took me years to unwind the messy web to get back to what I've been put on this planet to do. And let me tell you this, purpose doesn't have to feel out of arm's reach. And I've designed a plan for you to do a little bit each day over the next 30 days in a challenge that I call the Outlier 30. It's specifically designed to help you find or create more clarity around your purpose. So if you're feeling lost and you want to finally turn things around and live that life that you were destined to create, sign up right now. It's free. You have absolutely nothing to lose and the whole world to gain. Visit gorodman.com/outlier30 today. You mentioned how you have kids, and it's tough. I mean, it's tough to teach your kids these things because they do get that addictive taste of the social media or the video games or the virtual reality or whatever it might be. But at those ages, they don't really know how to control it. They don't understand the value of going, okay, it's okay for a little bit, but now it's time to shut off and get on to the next thing. And maybe that's an attention thing, but you know, when you've got your children like that, you can really teach your children how to be balanced or how to control those things. I could see that being a really big advantage for them.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the one thing that us as parents have to understand. Our kids, and again, this is going more from a parent model perspective, is there's different styles of parenting, right? Parents that, don't do anything or, hold their kids accountable. And then there's parents that are extremely authoritative, like authoritarian, I'm going to say, like dictative in terms of, you do this or else. It's somewhere in between. But one of the most important things is our children's brains are not fully developed until they're in their mid-20s. And so they are their brains are literally being shaped as they go through life, and they are not fully developed. So we are literally molding their brains or helping them mold their brains. So by allowing them to be on social media or these other technology platforms, that is shaping their brains, not necessarily the morals and principles and values that we should be teaching our kids. So we have a moral duty to protect our kids' brains because they are being developed by other people. We have to protect that. So as a parent, I'm very adamant. I'm like, no, I will not give my kids a cell phone until they're a certain age. I don't care what other parents or what other requirements they have. They will not have it up until probably about 16 years old because I know what it does to their brain. Their brains are literally putty and we are shaping them. So we have to take that into consideration.
Yeah. And I think just you take even the social media out of it or the games, those type of things, and just think about their experience in general as children, any type of trauma they might have received, the feedback that they constantly get, the way that they're molded or told to do certain things, all that has such a big impact from those kids, from the time they're born till, like you said, in their 20s or, till they leave high school, whatever it might be. There's so much influence on our children, so many things they're processing, taking in, trying to figure out, that it really is some important years. I mean, I would say the most important years of our lives.
I second that. Up until the children are 10, 12, till they get to that teenager year, basically all those beliefs, principles, how they behave, their level of accountability, all of that shapes them for the rest of their lives. bottom line.
And then we get to be our age, and then we start to do the work. I mean, really, honestly, a lot of people don't understand how important doing the work is, even when you get out. Say you go to college, you get out of college, or you don't go to college, whatever it might be, you're in your 20s, you don't start doing that work immediately. You just kind of are going with what you think life told you should be doing, or how you should be acting, or how you should be behaving, or the job that you should have. You're starting to process all of that. And then kind of feel like you get to maybe your 30s and you start thinking, wow, maybe this isn't what I want. And then you start to do the work. And I always think about, how can we help kids, or how can we help people coming through or younger to really understand the importance of doing that work right out of the gate? Just always be doing the work to try to figure those things out for yourself.
So after the age of 13, the first thing when kids are younger, up until they're 13, is being there for them, the verbal communication, being present with them, doing activities with them is very important, teaching them the morals and aspects. After 13, it's really about modeling. And it's not that modeling isn't important before. Modeling is very important the entire time. What I mean by modeling is the actual actions that you go through in life. Like, are you a hard worker yourself? Do you have strong work ethic? Are you tidying up the house versus sitting on the couch and having a beer all the time? I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with having a beer. I'm just saying all the time, consistent behavior, because that's what kids are going to see. So modeling that behavior after 13 is the most important thing that a person can do, because they're no longer taking your advice verbally as much as you'd like them to. They're teenagers now. They're going to be listening to their friends, but they're still going to be consciously and unconsciously watching your behavior, and that's going to influence them. So after 13, modeling the way you want your children to be is very, very important.
Well, and I feel like you get this dialogue too. I mean, you spend the first 20 years of your life receiving all this outside dialogue, because we're taught to listen to listen to the adults, to listen to your teachers, you're told to listen to everybody except yourself. You're told to learn from everybody but yourself. And I think about when you get out of that role, then you're then trying to figure out life. Okay, now I'm out here. Now I'm working. Now I'm trying to figure it out. But you've never been taught really how to do that work and how to figure it out. So what about that person who's sitting there at that point in their life and they're going, you know what? I really want to start doing this work. What are some of the things that are internal that they can identify that they can utilize to I don't want to say get better, but things they have to overcome? What are the common dialogues that are going through people's heads when they're trying to figure out how to start evolving and getting better? What's holding them back?
Yeah, that's a really big question, because it really depends on the individual. So the first place where I start with anybody, every single person as well, through our workshops, or whether it's one-on-one or whatever we do, is, what is the goal? That is where we start. Because if you don't have a goal, it's hard to figure out what to do. Because fundamentally, our brain is an organ that is goal-driven. I think we all need to understand this. Our brain is a goal-driven organ, and it does two particular things. It's constantly problem-solving, and it's constantly predicting, and it's doing that with a goal in mind. Now, if a person doesn't have a goal, it's problem-solving and predicting all the problems in life, the news, all the problems your spouse might have or your kids might have, all the things that people tell you to do, and all the goals you should have based on society, rather than your own individual goals. So the place to start is goals. And having clarity on the goals then determines a number of different things. And I call them, there's a number of different beliefs of change. And it really starts from A, do you have a goal? Then B, and these are all beliefs, and you can answer yes or no to these. The first one is, do you believe it's worth it? And if you don't believe it's worth it, then you're not going to get up off the couch to do it. Do you believe that you deserve it? Is another one. Because many of us, and when you ask, why do people, what are these things in our mind? One of the biggest things that are in our minds unconsciously is that we don't deserve something. We may be on the path to even achieving it, and because we don't feel like we deserve it, we'll sabotage it. So do you believe that you deserve it? Do you believe that you can achieve it? And this comes back to the premise of confidence, self-confidence. Do you believe in your own skills and abilities and past wins to believe in yourself? And so that's the next factor. Then it's also, do you know how to do it? Because the how actually stops people more faster than anything else. Because if they don't know how to do it, people come up with an excuse. I just know how to do it. Therefore, I'm not going to do it. right? So that's another factor. The other one is that, is it your responsibility and your accountability to do it? And what I mean by that is 100%. Because the moment you say, well, let's just say 90% I'm responsible, 10% is on this other person or this other circumstance, well, you've just given away your power. You've just given away your agency and locus of control, which basically means you are no longer in control of your life. You're basing it on external factors. Then there's also, do you feel like you're supported? Because if you don't feel like you have the support to do it, you're going to feel like you're alone. And doing something alone isn't fun. Much as, especially as men, we believe that we want to do it alone, it's not as fun. We want to pat ourselves on the back for achieving it and say, yeah, I'm the person responsible for it. But, doing it alone, A, it's not feasible, and B, it's not as fun. And then one of the last elements is, do you have enough energy to do it? And energy is such an important piece. It's so much more critical than time. It's a core aspect of the stuff that we work on and we teach. Because if a person realizes that energy is more powerful than time, they are far more effective. And here's a simple analogy. I can give two people an hour out of their day to do something. And if one person has more energy than the other person, they're going to outperform the other person. So I'd rather have a person with a higher level of energy than more time. It's a level of performance. They're going to have a higher level of performance. So those are all the reasons why people will actually do something or not do something and change. If even one of those factors is a no, for example, I don't feel like I have the energy, then that can stifle them. That can stop them in their tracks. So the more yeses you have to those questions, the more likely a person is to actually achieve that level of progress and then ultimately the goal.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. As a matter of fact, it's so aligned with what we teach because, we teach about purpose, identifying purpose. You got to know what your purpose in life is, because otherwise, if you don't do that, if you're not true to that, it's probably not going to work out. You're probably not going to be able to do the next thing. And that's when you're saying goals, right? Set your goals. What do you want? What's going to drive you out of bed in the morning? What's going to get you excited in the morning? It's the same thing. If you've got that, that's great. Then that mindset, right? If you don't have the right mindset for it, the same thing. You're not going to push it through. You said to the point of, well, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. But if you don't have the right mindset and you say, I don't know how to do it, you're not going to do it. But if you say, I don't know how to do it, but this is really important to me, I'm going to find a way to learn how to do it, and I'm going to make sure that I do it, then you're probably going to get up and start to actually do that work necessary to be successful. And then energy, for me, we're always talking about getting our bodies right. Because what we do in life, it takes a lot, especially if you're an entrepreneur, if you're building a business, it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of hours in a day to really be exceptional at what you're doing. And if you don't have your body right, and if you're not physically up for that task, you're not going to have the energy. You're not going to have the energy required, and then everything else is going to fail. And so, I hear it, and people say it in a million different ways, and you said it so beautifully, but I agree with you 100% on that. If you don't have these things in place, if you don't have the pillars in place, you're just setting yourself up to fail.
Absolutely.
So what do you tell people then? So we've got folks out there, a lot of people are entrepreneurs, they're sitting here listening, and they're saying to themselves, okay, great, I know what my purpose is. I'm in line with that. I feel like I've got my mindset is coming along, it's getting in the right place. They've got the energy, but there's still something not right, or there's still something not working. What does that person need to do? Is it a matter of just they haven't identified deep enough what their purpose is? Is it more that they're just hitting roadblocks, maybe from their historical perspective on how they should be living? What do you see in the areas that you're working in?
That's really interesting. So one of the things is to identify what options are. And so if you don't know where to look, it's hard to find something. So knowing where to look is very important. So that I think educating a person educating themselves, for example, because we have this misconception that this is normal for life. I'll give you a common one. For an entrepreneur to be successful, they must sacrifice and struggle. Okay. Well, that's only partially true, because a person, yes, there's some struggle, there's some sacrifice, but it's not long-term. It should not be long-term, because that's not the part of life. That's not the purpose of life, not to sacrifice and struggle all the time. Asking ourselves, are the beliefs that I have, are they actually accurate? And where did I come up with these beliefs? That's where I think people should start, because the vast majority of us have conscious and unconscious beliefs that are either not true, not based on fact, or they're outdated. So those are the key places to start. And then we just do a list and say, what are the conscious beliefs? Oh, okay, this is a belief that I have. Where did I get this belief from? Is it actually true? Who do I find? Where do I get information regarding this belief? Because if we can fundamentally shift our beliefs, we can shift our behavior. That's essentially it. If someone wants to shift their behavior, they need to identify the belief that is behind those behaviors and shift the beliefs. So that is the most powerful thing in our human psyche, is what we believe, because what we believe is our truth. We will bend the facts to meet our belief system, our reality. This has been shown through science over and over again. That's why we miss information, because our brain just shuts it out and filters it because it doesn't match our belief system. So if we understand our belief system, we can fundamentally understand ourselves as human beings.
What about the person, we talk a lot about fear too. And so often there are so many people who, when you start to go through these new processes, you start to evolve, you start to experiment, you start to experience and kind of figure out the directions that you want to be going in. But then you also are at that point where you're kind of shedding a skin, where people hate change. I mean, we don't like to say that we hate change, but when something different is coming into our lives, it gives us a little bit of a pause or a hesitation. And then fear starts to creep in. What if this doesn't work? What if I'm not good enough? What if what everybody has told me in life is correct?
Yep.
How do you start getting over that obstacle?
Okay, so fear is an interesting one. We're all going to have fear, but remember what fear is doing is it's a protection mechanism. That's what fear is. That's all it is, essentially a protection mechanism. And then we have to understand, just again, is this fear, is it actually valid? And so fear is created by the ego. It's not created by your identity. It's not created by your soul, as I talked about, right? The 3 layers. It's created by ego, because ego is there to protect you. If we understand that are a true core self, our soul, there's no fear. If fear does not exist within the soul, then what is there to fear? It's because our ego is trying to protect us from something, and trying to identify what that is very, very important. Now, typically with fear, there is an underlying belief system again. And so fear in itself is not the true challenge. It's the belief behind the fear. So I feel fear because I believe this. I believe I'm going to have less of this. I believe I'm not going to be successful. And if I'm not successful, therefore, I'm going to have less love or less status or less meaning in other people's lives. So what is, again, the belief behind the fear is very important. Typically with fear, for the vast majority of time, and I've noticed this within myself, and we did studies on this, it's consistent. It's a consistent fear. It's not an inconsistent fear. It's a pattern. So what is that pattern? When you identify what the pattern is, then you can get to the core of it. Because again, it's easier to understand what the core is if you see that it's actually a pattern. And also, when most people feel fear, it's when they're in their lower energy state. I've noticed this, and again, we did studies on this, and this is why one of my rules of thumb is I do not make any major decisions after 7 p.m. I do not think about work or anything like that, any major project after 7 p.m. For the vast majority, 95% of the time I don't. And the reason is because I know I'm in a lower energy state. If I'm in a lower energy state, my mind is not as protected. Therefore, all of these doubts, all of these fears are able to come into my mind, and it's harder for me to fight them off. So therefore, if as soon as these doubts start to come in, I don't even go there. I distract myself with my family or something, read a book or do something else, because I know I don't have the energy to fight it off as much as I would if I was in a higher energy state, like mid-morning or in the afternoon. So people will probably see that when they are lower energy, they're more fearful. So the question is, the strategy is to block it out completely, or take a look at it from a very subjective and, more importantly, objective viewpoint when you have more energy. If you tackle fear when you have more energy, you're more likely to squash it.
I would say the same thing is probably true and just in general on your productivity and your ideas and your thinking and everything else. Even outside of fear, I would think that those high energy time periods are essential for really making good decisions or really getting good things done. I know I had a time management guy on the show not too long ago, and he was talking a lot about how entrepreneurs will get up, and I'm guilty of this myself. I get up at 5 a.m, I get started, But then I go a long, long day, and I can feel like at the end of the day, I'm not making the best decisions. I feel like that second part of the day, I'm starting to kind of bonk. I'm losing my energy. I'm losing my focus. And I might spend 3 or 4 hours doing work that maybe I would have been better off just not working at all and getting that rest and making sure that I'm essential for that energetic period of time where I can really get good things done.
Yeah, and knowing when your energy is high or low and putting in those blocks of time are very, very important. It's one of the core aspects of performance. So knowing ourselves when we have higher energy, when we have lower energy, when we're distracted, when we're not distracted. If we come back to fear, it's simply this. Fear is one of the most powerful elements of our human psyche, belief systems, fear. And it could be a massive opponent. Is probably the biggest opponent that we have in our lives. And so do we want to go up against Goliath when we don't have any challenge? Like, do you want to go up and fight the biggest, baddest fighter out there when you're in low energy? No. You want to be the highest energy that you can be, because then you have a chance of actually surviving and knocking that fear out of the picture.
And it's sad too, because, most of these fears that we have or that go through our brains, they're not justifiable. I mean, or they're likely not going to happen, or they're probably not going to happen, or they're not going to become an issue, but we create the big issue before it's even happened.
Or they're not even our fears. They're not our fears. They are fears that are plugged in by our parents, by teachers, by society, by friends, by other people. So all of these fears are social. They've been created by society. So that's the biggest challenge right there, is most of these fears are not ours and they don't belong to us. So sometimes we just have to give those fears back. Again, it's another one of those things. It's a Buddhist philosophy, an ancient, you can say Eastern philosophy, where they talk about someone can walk up to you and give you a gift. That doesn't mean you have to accept it. The same thing is with fear. People give us fear. Our parents have given us fear. And that doesn't mean that maybe I've carried it for 30, 40, 50 years, but I'm going to give it back to them. That's not my fear to carry. Thank you very much. I think I've taken this on long enough. I've learned from it, but it wasn't mine in the first place. You can have it back. And it's a very important thing for us to do, especially as grown adults. Children should do this anyways, because, if we didn't plug as much fear into our kids, and I'm saying, subjective fear, like when you at a crosswalk, you got to look up both ways. I teach my kids that, right? You don't want to get squashed by a vehicle. But all of those other fears, like, oh, you have to be successful, right? You have to go to the best schools. You have to get straight A's or else. Those are the kids' fears. Those are our fears. And we have to stop doing that to our children.
No, and it's impactful. And, I know that we talk all the time around my household about my grandparents. That my grandmother was, I'm shocked that I'm not afraid of everything. Like, I just feel like, she was one of those people who was like, the world is a scary, scary place. And everywhere you go, be aware of this, be aware of that. And then sometimes I feel that creeping in with my kids too. And I have to stop myself and go, oh, yeah, no, that's, that might not be an issue. I need to make sure that I'm stopping that cycle that I was taught when I was a kid to be fearful of everything.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because again, our beliefs, even our energy in terms of, I'm going to call it spiritual energy, we take that on from generations. So we have to take the good and kind of say no thank you to the rest.
These have been great conversations that I feel like you and I could probably be on for another couple hours just talking about philosophy. You've got such an incredible depth of knowledge, so I really appreciate you coming on. But I want people to be able to find you too, because I know that you've got so much more information and you've got so much to teach. Where do people need to go if they want to find you and learn more about what you do?
Sure. There's a couple of places. One is you can go to my website, purdeepsangha.com. You can also...
Could you spell that? Because that is a unique spelling.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Purdeep, as in Peter, SANGHA.com. That's probably the first place. And then you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in checking out the book, you can always go to completemanbook.com and that'll take you to the appropriate place.
You'll love that. And I'm going to put that in the show notes so people can get to it there also. But I always ask one last question. And the question is, if you could go back in time and just sit down with your younger self and give yourself the most valuable piece of advice that you've accumulated over your lifetime, what would that one piece of advice be?
Yeah, I think for me, for my life, my personal experiences, I probably it would have been to spend more time with the people that I love and connect with them at a deeper level. Because every time, whether I've lost my grandma, my grandpa, my dad, aunts, uncles, particularly the individuals that were really special to me, um, I feel like I could have done a little bit better in terms of spending more time with them. Not only connecting with them, but also learning from them. The one thing that I realize the most now, since my dad is gone, my dad passed away 5 years ago. His younger brother passed away 6 months after he did. His oldest brother is around, but he's not very friendly man. But what I realized was the entire history of my dad's bloodline and family has it's almost vanished. It's the knowledge, the wisdom, everything that's been passed on from generation to generation is no longer there. And I wish I would have spent more time learning from my dad, from my grandfather, from aunts and uncles, because I think there's a ton of wisdom there that I could have taken on personally and that I could have shared with my children.
Absolutely love that. And I could not agree with you more. So, Purdeep, thanks for coming on the show today. This has been incredible. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the time and this thoughtful, mindful conversation, Rodman. Appreciate it.